The men who smelled like death saved what was left of my command. The men who smelled of American soap died. I'm 96 years old. For 54 years I've carried the weight of that truth, and the 30 names attached to it. We had the technology, the firepower, the overwhelming force. They had 4 men, and a patience we dismissed as laziness. I was a colonel. I was warned. And I chose pride over listening. The deadliest thing on that battlefield wasn't an enemy bullet. It was our own damn arrogance. I wrote the report that could have saved countless others. The Army buried it. For 54 years, so was this story. If you believe lessons paid for in blood shouldn't be forgotten, you need to hear this. Subscribe and stay with me. I'm going to tell you exactly what it cost. So you have to ask yourself some questions. I know I have. Every day for 54 years. Why would a decorated colonel, a West Point man with 2 tours under his belt, trust an aerial photograph over the word of a soldier who'd been close enough to the enemy to smell his cooking fires? Why? And what does it feel like to be judged, not in a courtroom, not by your superiors, but by the devastating absolute silence of a better soldier? A man who knew you were wrong and just watched you do it. And the last question, the one that wakes me up at night. How much is a 6-hour delay really worth? I can tell you the exact price. It's 30 names. 30 names carved on a black wall in Washington. Stay with me. You need to hear this. It was April 1970. We were operating in Tây Ninh province, right on the Cambodian border. The whole area was called the Parrot's Beak. A dagger pointed at Saigon. Nixon was about to send us into Cambodia, but nobody knew that yet. Officially, we were just squeezing the NVA's supply lines. My unit, the 3rd of the 11th Armored Cavalry, was part of a big push to secure the roads, the arteries. The dry season was ending. It was hot. God, the heat. We were talking 36 degrees Celsius, 100 degrees Fahrenheit easy, before you even factored in the humidity. It was like breathing water. The ground was either choking red dust or this triple canopy jungle so thick the sun never touched the floor. It was a predictable war. We used the roads. They used the jungle. And we were about to find out they understood both better than we did. I remember stepping out of the chopper at the fire support base. The air hits you first. It's not just hot, it's thick. You can taste it. A mix of diesel fumes from the generators, red dust that gets into your teeth, and the smell of the jungle itself. It's a sweet smell, like flowers and rot all mixed together. I'd been in country twice before. I thought I knew that smell. I thought I was used to it. I was 42 years old, a full-bird colonel. I had West Point, I had experience, and I had the full might of the United States Army behind me. We had intelligence, we had firepower, we had a plan. I was confident. I truly believed, standing there in my starch fatigues, that we were an unstoppable machine, that our doctrine was sound, that we could bend that place to our will. That was my first mistake, believing my own press. We'd hear things, rumors, stories about the Australians, the SASR. You'd get a pilot back at the mess having a drink and he'd say, "Saw 4 of them today, just appeared, on a hilltop miles from nowhere." We laughed it off. Ghost stories. Men out in the bush too long. I remember saying to my adjutant, Major Harris, "Let them play their spooky games. We're the 11th Cavalry. We're a hammer. You don't kill a snake with a scalpel when you've got a hammer." We thought they were cowboys, unprofessional. Their uniforms were a mess. They didn't follow our regulations. To me, they were an anomaly, an afterthought. So when Harris told me a 4-man SASR patrol needed an urgent, unscheduled debrief, I was irritated. It was an inconvenience. We had a schedule to keep. My maps were perfect. The aerial photos were clear. What could 4 raggedy soldiers possibly have to tell me? They came into the command tent at 1400 hours, exactly on time. 4 of them. And the first thing that hit me wasn't how they looked, but how they smelled. Christ. It wasn't just sweat. It was the smell of the earth itself, like they'd been buried for a week and had just clawed their way out. A primal mix of mud, river water, and something else, something vegetal and rotten. It was the jungle's own breath, and it was foul. I actually took a half step back, unconsciously, and I saw my adjutant, Harris, do the same. They were gaunt. Their uniforms weren't just dirty. They were a patchwork of different greens, faded to near white in places, torn and sewn by hand. I thought, these are the specialists. They look like bloody scarecrows. My entire concept of a professional soldier was built on discipline, on presentation. This was an affront. I gestured towards them, more to my adjutant than to them, and I said, "Major, get these men some hot chow and access to the showers." And the one in charge, Sergeant Fraser, he just looked at me. His eyes were pale, the only clean thing about him. They were still and calm, and they pinned me in place. He didn't blink, and he said, "We'd prefer not to smell like a target, sir. The NVA likes soap." The words just hung there in the air-conditioned quiet of the tent. It wasn't insubordination, not really. It was a statement of fact. A fact that implied my entire world, my hot meals, my showers, my clean fatigues, were a liability. That my comfort was a beacon for the enemy. I felt a prickle of anger, but underneath it, for the first time, a sliver of profound unease. Fraser then turned to my operational map, the one I'd spent 2 days perfecting. His men carried their webbing high and tight, stripped of everything but ammo and water. No packs, no sleeping gear, nothing. It was a flagrant violation of every standing order for field equipment. I leaned over to Harris and whispered, "Look at that. Amateurs. They'd last one night." But as I said it, Fraser tapped a single spot on the map with a dirty fingernail. He didn't even lean in close. He said, "There. It's a collapsed culvert under the road. Your aerials missed it. It's a perfect choke point." I stared at the map. He was right. There was a faint shadow, a smudge I'd dismissed as a trick of the light. Wait. But how could he possibly know that? No, there had to be another explanation. It was a lucky guess. It had to be. He asked me if I knew how far the smell of American soap travels in humid air. I just stared at him. He didn't wait for an answer. He said, 50 meters, sir. Downwind, maybe more. And it hangs in the air for an hour. He explained it to me like I was a child. The science of it. Our diet, the chemicals in our insect repellent, the scent of our chewing tobacco, even the oils in our skin. They were all part of a signature. An olfactory fingerprint that the NVA who lived in that jungle could read like a book. So for 48 hours before a patrol, his men ate nothing but rice and local plants. They washed in river water, no soap. They didn't smoke, they didn't chew. They systematically erased themselves. When he explained that, the logic of it, I still thought it was extreme, an overreaction. But then he gave me the numbers. Patrols that followed their scent discipline had a 60% lower rate of accidental contact. 60%. It wasn't superstition. It was science. Then he started talking tactics, and the gap between our worlds became a chasm. We operated in platoons, 30 or 40 men, a big, loud footprint. They moved in patrols of four men. We pushed hard, trying to cover 10, 12 kilometers a day. They might cover 1, maybe 2. On a map, it looked like they were lazy, useless. But they weren't moving, they were observing, they were listening, they were becoming part of the landscape. We used the radio constantly, hourly check-ins, situation reports. It was doctrine. For them, radio silence was total. A patrol might go 5 days and make one single coded burst. One. Because, as Fraser put it, every time you press that handset, sir, you're telling the enemy exactly where you are and who you are. We were trying to find and fix the enemy with firepower. They were trying to find the enemy, map him, understand him, and then leave without him ever knowing they'd been there. It was two completely opposing philosophies of war. My entire career, everything West Point had taught me, was about being the hammer. You apply overwhelming force at a decisive point. You use speed, technology, and aggression to intimidate and break the enemy. You make sure he knows you are there. You want him to be afraid of the noise you make. Fraser's philosophy was the complete opposite. It was the scalpel. Patience over speed. Invisibility over intimidation. Knowledge over firepower. He wasn't trying to beat the enemy. He was trying to outthink him. He looked at me, this sergeant covered in mud, and he delivered the line that haunts me to this day. He said, "You want the enemy to know you're here, sir. We want them to die never knowing we were." And that got to me. It burrowed under my skin. Because in the sterile, artificial cold of my command tent, his logic made a terrible, undeniable sense. It was a truth I wasn't equipped to handle. It was 0940 on the morning of the 11th of April. 19 hours and 20 minutes after I had signed that order. My men were moving down Route 246 just as planned. 3 platoons, 124 men. I was in the command tent listening to the routine radio chatter. The air conditioning hummed. I could hear the clink of the coffee pot. The air smelled of paper and ink. And through the radio I could hear the sounds of my men. The rumble of the M113s, the occasional static-laced command, and underneath it all the constant high-pitched thrum of the cicadas from the jungle lining the road. I remember tracing the route on the map with my finger. My finger. It felt so detached, so clean. A god, moving pieces on a board. And then, one of the operators, a kid named Miller on the radio watch, he tensed up. He tilted his head. He looked at me and said, "Sir," the jungle just went quiet. And in the sudden, absolute silence from the radio's open channel, before the first shot was fired, I knew. I knew exactly what was about to happen. The first sound wasn't a bang. It was a roar, a solid wall of noise that erupted from both sides of the road at once. 1,000 angry wasps. AK-47s, RPDs, the deep gut-thumping whoosh of RPGs. And then the scream started. In the first 10 seconds, the radio became a single sustained howl of static, gunfire, and terror. A voice, a young Lieutenant Billy Cobb, 23 years old. I'd shared a coffee with him that morning. His voice cut through, high and panicked. "We are in the kill zone. They're everywhere. It's the exact kill zone they described." And then his transmission just stopped, cut off. I grabbed the handset, screaming at the operator, "Get me Dragon Ship! Get me air support! Now!" I was following the book, the doctrine. But the book hadn't accounted for this, the sheer, overwhelming volume of it. The reports that got through were pure chaos. Men screaming about NVA in the trees, on the road, behind them. It wasn't a battle. It was a slaughterhouse, and I was listening to it happen, live, from my air-conditioned tent. Then, after what felt like an eternity but was probably less than 10 minutes, the chaos on the radio began to change. A new voice cut through the static, frantic but coherent. A survivor. "We have friendlies engaging the tree line, west flank. I don't know who they are, 4 men. They're tearing them apart." I knew instantly. My blood ran cold. It was Fraser. The reports became more specific. There was no sound of their weapons, just the results. The NVA command element, the nerve center of the ambush, was being dismantled. Silently, methodically. It was surgical. And the NVA, confused, their leadership gone, began to fall back. The firing slackened. The ambush was broken. Not by my firepower, not by my air support, which was still minutes away. It was broken by 4 men I had dismissed as unprofessional. 4 ghosts. 4 men who had just saved the remnants of my command from complete annihilation. And in that moment, in the deafening silence that followed, the only thing I could think was, he was right. God help me, he was right. The medevac choppers flew in and out for 2 hours. I didn't go to the site, I couldn't. I just sat in the tent, the same damn tent, and listened to the reports. The call finally came from my superior, a brigadier general up at Divisional HQ. He didn't shout. That would have been easier. He was cold, clinical. He said, "Doug, this is a disaster. What the hell happened?" I tried to explain. I told him about the SASR, about the warning, about their methods. There was a long silence on the other end. Then he said, "Listen to me, Colonel. You lost 30 men, 30. Don't you dare come on this line and tell me it's because you didn't listen to 4 rogue troopers playing cowboys in the jungle. Your report will state that you were overwhelmed by a numerically superior force. Is that understood?" I just stood there, looking at my own reflection in the dark plastic of the radio handset. I said, "Yes, sir." How do you explain to a man like that? How do you tell him that everything we believed, everything we were taught, was a lie? That the men we mocked were the only ones who actually knew how to fight this war? You don't. You just say, "Yes, sir," and you die a little inside. I wrote the report, 20 pages. I detailed everything. Fraser's warning, the scent discipline, the patrol size, the radio silence. I attached the kill ratio data from his patrol's engagement. I recommended a complete doctrinal review of our small unit tactics and deep reconnaissance. I sent it up the chain. 2 weeks later, I got a 1-page memo back. It said my report was under review, and that my battalion was being rotated to a less active area for refit and retraining. It was a punishment. They were burying me, and they buried the report with me. Years later, after I was out, I got my hands on a declassified operational summary for that period. There it was, in black and white. For that entire year in that province, the SASR's cumulative kill ratio was 1 to 480. 1 dead Australian for nearly 500 enemy. The average for U.S. infantry battalions in the same area, 1 to 13. We weren't just losing. We were being bled dry, systematically, by our own arrogance. And my report, the one that might have saved even a few of those boys, was sitting in a file cabinet somewhere, stamped, "Not actionable." So, you have to wonder why. Why do institutions, big, powerful, smart institutions, keep making the same mistakes when the proof they're wrong is staring them right in the face? It's pride. It's the sheer bone-deep arrogance of believing your system can't be wrong because you've invested too much in it. The inertia is unstoppable. We had the numbers, we had the reports, and we buried them. The lessons Fraser and his men taught us for free in 1970, we had to buy them again in Afghanistan, in Iraq. It took 30 years for our own special forces to make those same tactics their gospel. How many good men died in those 30 years because a generation of colonels and generals were taught that a map was more real than the ground it represents? Where in your own life are you doing that? Ignoring a truth because it's just too damned expensive to your ego to admit you were wrong. It always has a cost, believe me. Remember those 3 questions I asked at the start? I've had 54 years to think about the answers. The first one, why trust a photo over a soldier? Because the photo was clean, and it told me I was right. The soldier was dirty, and he told me I was a fool. And I wasn't brave enough to be a fool. The second, what's it like to be judged by a better man's silence? It's the loudest sound in the world. It's the sound of my life for the last 5 decades. A constant, deafening reminder of my failure. And the last question, what's a 6-hour delay worth? It's worth 30 headstones. It's worth Billy Cobb never seeing his 24th birthday. It's worth the rest of my life trying to square a debt that can't be squared. 1 to 13. That was our ratio. 1 to 480. That was theirs. After all this time, it's the only math that still wakes me up in the middle of the night. Every night.